Well, good afternoon. It's time for another episode of Diligence, and I'm here today with, and you know what? I've never actually said your name out loud to you. Is it Chetan or Chetan? How do you say your name?
Yeah, I've been called all kinds of things, so whatever you like.
Okay, we'll go with Chetan.
Not terribly fussed. It means multiple things in multiple languages, depending on the accent.
Yeah. Well, and where does the name originate? Is there a meaning behind the name?
It's a name I was given by Osho. The Parkyn, basically, the surname comes from the family of Catherine Parr, who was the last wife of Henry VIII. She was the survivor. So the kin of Parkyn. The Chetan was given me by Osho. He initiated me in 1979. This is when all this magic started happening in my world. And it's a name I've carried with me. He gave me the name Swami Anand Chetan. And Swami means master, Anand means bliss, and Chetan means consciousness. And he kept telling me, your way to consciousness, full realization, is bliss. And I have to say he's right. It's like I find my life more and more blissful as time goes on, and I feel more and more connected to whatever is going on this crazy planet. So
amazing. So do you even, like, you had a previous last name, and Osho gave it to you and you were like, yep, sounds good to me? Or like, how does
hit the note on the head. I thought at the time, he gave me this name consciousness, and I think, well, consciousness means a fair degree of awakening. And I remember that time I was so fast asleep. Oh my God. I'm embarrassed to remember those times. I mean, dormant. But somehow or other found myself in his company and found myself being initiated, and it's never looked back.
Amazing. What age were you then when that happened?
I think I was 27. Like I was in my Saturn return, and it was a realization for me. This is something that had to take place. Going to the feet of an enlightened master. It was an incredible experience.
Amazing. Yeah, I would say I was asleep at the wheel until like 2 years ago. So I'm just like starting to come online. It's been rapid. So I already told you that I wanted you to tell the story of because you explained it or told the story on Jonah Dempsey's Frequency podcast, and I think it needs to be told again. So, I remember, and I shouldn't tell it other than it involves your shadow and a bunch of things, and it was super cool. So you should just describe it.
So I had gone backwards and forwards to India a few times. I used to drive a thing called the Magic Bus, which literally was London to Delhi or Kathmandu, depending. But it was an overland trip down through Europe, down through what was then Yugoslavia, and then into Greece. And it was pre-internet. It was no cell phones or anything like that. The word would go round. Bus is coming to such and such a cafe at such and such a time. Trip to India, $60. So yeah, that was it. Driving around all these different cafes in Belgium and Germany and Austria. And by the time we got to Thessaloniki in Greece, we had a full bus, 43 seats. And took off, Turkey. That was a military junta in those days. It was kind of tricky getting across. The Shah was still in operation in Iran. So it was fairly easy, but we didn't want to make any kind of a fuss. And then arriving in Afghanistan, Herat, it's like all of a sudden the bus was full of smoke. Hash. It's incredible. And a lot of people dropped off in Kabul, and a lot of people got on the bus in Kabul, went off down through into Pakistan, which was a bit more severe, and then into India, where it was like, hallelujah. India is an amazing place. And I did that trip a few times. And my first bus trip, the people on board, most of them were going to Osho's ashram. And I kept running into them in various places in India later on. And it was quite evident something major had happened for them. Some massive transformation had happened. And so,
Sorry, Oh, good. I was going to say, were you familiar with Osho at the time, or just like?
No, I was not into gurus. I was not into spirituality. I wasn't into anything. I was a mechanical engineer as far as anyone was concerned. But I knew if I was going to go to be in his place, that would be the end of it. My travels would be over. I would just be there. And so I decided to do a trip through Africa, and went back to England, got a truck. And again, we had like 20 seats in the truck. It was a 4-wheel drive truck, and drove off down through Europe, ferry across to Tunisia, through the Sahara Desert. There were no roads in those days. And then down to Nigeria, Cameroon, and then across through Zaire to East Africa, to Kenya and Mombasa. And it was quite clear to me when I arrived in Mombasa, I was done. I'd had these great jobs, met all kinds of crazy people, had incredible experiences traveling. You can imagine. No, I was completely innocent in those days, and somehow, we found our way through. I hit the wall when I was in Mombasa. Just my life did not add up anymore, and I knew absolutely that it was conclusive. Now I'm going to go to Osho, see if he's got an answer for me. So I go to India and arrive at his ashram with a full moon in the morning, and there were thousands of people there. We're all dressing orange, and everyone was wearing a little mala, and quite a scene. And I was terribly, desperately shy, so I would not stick my head up about anything, and I just, somehow fit in the community. Mm-hmm. And he would talk every day, amazing discourses, around the universe a few times and then back, answering people's questions, incredible stuff. Like such a brilliant speaker, and with such love and such compassion and such what I could perceive as, such consciousness, like tuning into things, tuning into people in the audience and what it is they needed to hear. It was incredible. So, the day came for me to be initiated, and he gave me the initiation, Swami Anand Chetan, Master Bliss Consciousness, and just said, your path to enlightenment, your path to realization is through bliss. Be blissful. Find your bliss. And he said, basically, to find your bliss, get out of your head. Okay. Somebody with a defined mind in his chart, there were those days when I was sitting in meditation, or supposedly, and looking around, and everyone's absolutely calm and quiet, and my mind is bananas. Anyway, so everyone had the opportunity to ask questions and have them answered in his discourses. And I was way too shy to let that happen. And he said, it doesn't matter, if you've got a bunch of questions, you want to find out about yourself. There's a man that lives in Mumbai, what used to be Bombay. You go and visit with him, he'll tell you everything, and you'll never need to ask me another question. So sure enough, I catch the train down to Mumbai. I get a taxi. The taxi has no idea where he's going, the driver. Go round and round and round in circles, but finally I see the building and I get out of the taxi and I start running. There was just this urgency. I need to get there. Knock on his door, and the guy comes to the door and says, oh, great, I was expecting you. And it was quite clear to me, he had some other kind of appointment arrangement than I had, because I hadn't, anyway, whatever. He was expecting me.
Yeah.
It's good you came at this time, because if you'd come a little bit later, I wouldn't be able to read for you. I can't read after 12 noon. The guy's official title is Chaya Shastri, which something means like a shadow reader. So he didn't actually read my shadow, but he measured, or his son measured my shadow with this funny looking stick that had these color markings on it. I was out of breath. And then the taxi driver, who's parked somewhere and comes racing up and, demands to be paid for him driving me around in circles. We settle that.
Yeah.
It's the sun measures my shadow, and I'm so out of breath, I'm not really paying attention. But he measures my shadow. He puts the stick on the bottom of my heel and measures my shadow. Now, I don't know whether it was to the top of my head, to my aura, to my shoulder, whatever. But there it was. We go back upstairs, and his father asks for whatever the calculation was on the stick, asks for my date of birth, time of birth, place of birth, does the astrology for that very quickly, asks for my full name, does the numerology from that. And he's now got 3 different calculations. He's now very happy, he's satisfied that he knows what he's looking for. Behind his desk, he's got this parquet wood floor and a rolling chair, and he rolls the chair along this huge bookcase, floor to ceiling with these black bound books, hundreds and hundreds of these books. And he pulls out a book, comes back to the table, opens up to a page and starts reading it. And I don't know, I mean, he wouldn't let me look at the book, but I was just sitting there, like, what's this all about? And he starts off 1,000 lifetimes ago, and then 100 lifetimes ago, and then 10 lifetimes ago. Now, you've got to realize India, they have a very different approach to life than we have in the West, the so-called West, the Wild West. And he's reading from a book that was basically scribed, or the information on the page was scribed somewhere between 2,500 and 3,000 years ago. And it's my page. And he's got it from my shadow and from my astrology or whatever. Anyway, what he's telling me, how can I possibly tune into something that happened 1,000 lifetimes? Because somehow he's saying something and it resonates. And then the 100 lifetimes ago, the same thing. And then the 10 lifetimes ago, and then the same thing. And then he comes into where I've been in this lifetime and where I grew up and what school I went to and all these things. And he's describing these things to me. And it's incredible. My hair was probably looking something like yours at the time, standing there.
Yeah.
And it was like incredible. And then he gets into what was going on last week and how I'd caught the train down this morning and what's going to happen next week and next month and next year. He tells me when I'm going to get enlightened. He tells me when I'm going to die. Closes the book up. Like case closed. And he says, you got any questions? It's like, what am I supposed to ask now? I hadn't got anything to ask him at all. But then, he says, I want you to come and work with me because you know how to do this. And this was so beyond anything I had considered. I all I knew was growing up in England, driving around the place and, being an engineer and stuff. And he's saying, you've got this gift. You know how to do this. And human design will say, for God's sake, sleep on it. But the human design wasn't in my life at that time. So I'm thinking like a madman. And I just say to him, I can't do that. I'm already committed. I've come to India to be with Osho, and that's my thing. So, I said, no, I can't do it. And he just laughs like I've told him something really funny. And obviously to him, it is something really funny. Because those times in your life, Sean, where there's a massive possibility. There's either the tried and true, I always do it this way, and everyone's going to approve if I do it this way, and this is a sensible thing to do. Or take a jump. Well, I took the tried and true. I said, no, I can't do it. But he's laughing because he can see this fork in the road. He could see a completely different life form if I was agreeing to work with him, a father to son thing in which he's inviting somebody that's got the gift. Known to him, apparently, not known to me at that time. But when he finishes laughing, and I just say this, I make a point about this to everybody because we all get these things in our life. Ra tells us there's no choice. There is choice, but you have to be so brave, so alert to be able to make that choice. You really got to go deep in yourself or be really trusting in life. So when he finished laughing, he said, it doesn't matter, you're going to do this work anyhow.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, because there's a new system. It's going to come into your life. You're going to write books about it. You're going to teach all over the world about it. You're going to read people with this new system, and it's going to change their lives forever. This was 1979. So in a sense, I was the first person to know about human design. I had no idea what it was. I didn't know where it was coming from or the significance. But, I'd go out of there kind of, a little bit weird because he said, look, it's going to happen anyhow. So my advice to you is to learn a system, practice with that system, and remind yourself how to read for people. Because you know how to do it. You've been doing it for lifetimes on end. So.
Oh. Something just happened. to the stream. Uh-oh.
What happened there?
I think it dropped for a second there, but it was right when you finished talking. Okay, so I have a question to that. What system did you pick up? Because it wasn't human design yet, right? Oh,
There we are.
let's try that again.
Technology.
Yeah, it's streaming and the internet. So this was before human design, before Ra had the download. So, but you were instructed to learn a system so that you had a basis. So, what system did you? Where did you go there?
Well, here I am, Sean. I go out of this place in Mumbai and my head's, like, let me find lunch somewhere. I'm feeling a bit weird. I need to get grounded. I had no intention of reading for anybody.
Mm-hmm.
As I said, I was so shy. I didn't want to do, it's like that was beyond belief what just happened there. What happened? I have no idea. So anyway, I go back to where I am in Pune, in India, Osho's ashram. And about a week later, I'm working in a part of the ashram where there's a woman who comes from town and delivers clothes to the ashram, like these red robes and orange robes and stuff. Mm-hmm. And she brings her husband with her. And I'm just sitting there, and the husband says, let me look at your hands. And he has this gift to be able to read hands. So he's holding my hands and he's telling me and repeating a lot of things I heard the week before from the shadow reader. It was like uncanny. How could he possibly say these things? Well, as I say, India is a very different place. It's a very amazing place. Anyway, he gets into the reading. He's kind of finished his story and he says, I want to show you how to do this. And for 10 minutes, he goes through all the different markings and different fingers and different swirls and skin marks on the hands. And I get a 10-minute download, basically, of how to do it. And then he rolls my hands up and he says, that's enough, now practice. And again, I'm not going to talk to anybody about this stuff. It's like, I'm so shy. It's like, how could I possibly do this? Mm-hmm. And here's the thing, Sean, none of us have ever been encouraged to be true to ourselves. It doesn't matter what the circumstance is. We've never been told to trust in ourselves. And this was a huge learning thing for me in the following hours, because I went back to where I was staying. It was some funky little hotel on the outskirts of Pune. And they had a little outdoor restaurant. Restaurant's a kind of glorified name for where you could actually have some food and eat. But we were sitting out in the dark and there were some lights on and the stars and the moon. And we finished our dinner. I'm having dinner with friends. And I just kind of quietly say at the end of the meal, the weirdest thing happened to me today. This guy showed me how to read hands. And I kid you not, 10 seconds later, there's not a space on the table. Everybody has put their hands in front of me. Everybody at the other tables, the waiter comes, puts his hands down, and they ask me to tell them, what do I see? So I'm kind of compromised. I'm in this position. And I start telling them what I see in their hands. And they're all going, huh? How did you know to tell me that? I said, it's in your hands. It's what I pick up in your hands. Mm. So in that evening, it became very evident to me. This was in, I think, December of 1979. It was very clear to me. There's something going on here. Mm-hmm. And so that's when I started reading. I read with hands. I learned the Ching. I learned the tarot. I learned coffee grinds. I learned tea leaves. I learned auras, astrology. Everything I could get my hands on, I studied and practiced with each one of these different systems, describing what I saw. 1987, Ra gets this download. He's no idea what he's being given.
Right.
No idea at all. No instruction book. And I think it was in the space of several months where he destroyed everything he'd been given. He burned it. And, it was too much. I mean, I can't blame the guy for a second.
No.
What a horrific experience, having a voice, all of a sudden taking over. And fortunately, after a year, he came back and somebody had not destroyed their chart. So he started working from that chart and rebuilding the whole system, or what he understood to be the system. But as I say, there was no instruction book. Mm. And this was not part of his background at all. He was a Canadian, I believe, Polish Catholic Canadian, and background was in newspaper advertising sales. Mm-hmm. Until he started having this mystical life. Anyhow, God knows how he did it. He pulled it off. He put it together, He went to Germany. He started introducing the system in Germany, doing these talks, these public talks. And I think it took several weeks until actually he had an audience.
Mm-hmm.
People said, we need to know more about this. And then all of a sudden the thing started unrolling. 1993, he wanted to come to America. And because he was always broke. This, it's like, do not become a prophet if you can avoid it. It's a tough path. God knows what he went through. He was always broke. And he thought, well, maybe if I go to America, there'll be some money there. Mm-hmm. And he just happens to make connection with an old girlfriend of mine who's living in Taos in New Mexico, and she hosts him for the next 7 years. I'm in Maui at the time, resting, and she calls me one day. I can't really remember because I had a party phone line with about 7 other people on that same line. I think it was a phone call. And she says, I got this guy coming from Europe and he's got this new system. And immediately new system? Mm-hmm. Yeah? What is this? And she sends me my chart. I take one look at the chart and I know this is it. This is the thing he told me about in India in 1979. So then twice a year, every year, I even ended up selling my Maui cruiser, which is the essential conveyance in Maui. I even sold that to be able to afford to go, they sometimes hitchhike to Taos, New Mexico to be for his classes. And I took copious notes. In the very beginning, we talked about basic and advanced. We talked about the centers. We talked about the physics, the neutrino stream. We talked about quarks and leptons and all these things that we were trying to prove human design. 1993, neutrinos were still some kind of airy-fairy idea, not proven. And then 1997, the Canadians and the Japanese in deep mines filled with sensors and heavy water, they detected neutrinos and they detected the fact that neutrinos carried mass. And so there were 4 years. There were 4 years where we were just, who knows? I'd already been told this thing is what you're doing now. So I didn't have any question about it. But, Ra was always like, I've got to be able to prove it with physics or something or other. Mm-hmm. So we had basic and advanced. We never went past channels and centers and gates. He'd written his Rei Vi Ching, which I honestly disliked right from the get-go. And I complained to him about that. I said, I can't tell people this language you're using here. And he said, well, it doesn't matter, write your own. So I did. I wrote the Book of Lines, and I wrote it in 5th dimensional language. And, it's a sutra book. You read a line that relates to you and you sense the frequency and drop into a space. It's just frequency. So, as I say, 7 years, I went for every class he gave. And slowly, he came back and said, oh, well, now we got this thing called type. Now we got this thing called authority. And now we got this thing called profile. And now we got this thing we call crosses, which I dislike also. I call them life themes.
Okay.
And,
life themes.
Nobody needs to have a cross on their back.
Yeah.
Anyway, there are life themes. The fact that there are 4 points in the sky around us, that relate to the genes within us, it's great.
Mm-hmm.
But they provide for a theme. They're a storyline to your book, to your whole life journey. Mm-hmm. So around 7 years in, he would then started talking about bases. He hadn't come up with the word variables yet, but he was fishing around. I've got to have more classes. I can't keep doing the same classes the whole time. So he started teaching me about bases and talk about obscure. By this time he'd moved to Sedona, and we used to come. By this time I'd moved to California with my wife, Carola, and we drive from California to Sedona and be in his classes and stuff because we wanted to support him. We actually hosted him. He had some major hospital bills he had to deal with, and I hosted him in Maui, and hosted him in California, just trying to help, But when he started going really obscure like this, we'd sit there in his classes. He was a great talker. he loved to have a joint or something to, keep the buzz going. And he'd just talk, and he weren't allowed to record, and he would just sit there and I'd take notes, and I'd end up the day when he's talking about bases and stuff, I'd have, maybe a couple of pages of notes, of which maybe one paragraph's relevant or actually practical on some level. He was really going into a realm that was impractical. I understood his situation and I really wanted to support him, but there just came this point in time where it was not a win-win.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, it was around 2000. That was it. I parted company.
Right.
He at that time was starting Jovian Archive and IHDS, and some of our ex-students then moved in to start running IHDS for it as a business, and qualifying people to do readings. Well, he'd trained me as a teacher in 1997, so he always came out with this statement, the Groucho Marx statement: I would never join an organization that would see fit to have me as a member. And that was it. I had no intention of joining Jovian Archive or IHDS, and didn't see the need for it because I was already teaching human design anyhow.
Mm-hmm.
And, so I was basically blacklisted. And then, what about what the shadow reader had told me in 1979? Where are the books? So I don't know how many times I started writing a human design book, and I was definitely writing the Book of Lines at the same time. And I'd started writing the Book of Destinies on the life themes. And the human design book, one day, I've tried and nothing. I mean, how'd you get a book out there, a brand new, obscure system, whatever? And as far as I know, Ra had no intention of putting a book out.
Mm-hmm.
He'd done his black book and his white book, which were kind of textbooks. But, there wasn't a readable book for the general public. And one day I find myself reading for the boyfriend of an old client. And she said, Chetan, you really need to read for him because otherwise we're not going to make it. So I pick up the phone and dial up, and she's there, and she says, great, I've just given him his chart and I'm handing him the phone now, and I'll be back later. I've no idea who this is. I can't see him. I've never met him, but he's got an English accent. And so I launch into the reading with him, and I go through the whole reading, about 90 minutes of just full on, as much as I can convey to him that is practical to him. Get to the end of the reading, and I say, well, that's pretty much what I have to share with you today. Dead silence. I thought, shit, he's put the phone down and walked off. But he comes back about 20 seconds later and said, there's a book in this. And I said, oh, really? And he said, yes, and I'll help you make it happen. It then turns out that he was the number one correspondent for newspapers in England. He'd won the top prize for the best reporting. He was a newspaper investigative reporter. He used to go into battlegrounds and stuff, and sift out what's really going on. And yeah, he won that top award. And he quit. He'd quit at the top and become a ghostwriter instead. So he knew all the connections in the publishing industry. And so the next thing I find, he's inviting me to go to London. And I go over there and I stay with him for a few days. And he introduces me to the number one literary agent in London, a man called Jonathan Lloyd. And Jonathan Lloyd, is used to selling thrillers, and novels and stuff. This kind of woo-woo stuff, not his gig at all. However, on Steve's recommendation, he trusts me. And he says, I'm going to take you into two publishers. I'm going to take you into HarperCollins and Random House, and we'll see what happens. Before I went to London, I had asked, who are the people I'm going to meet in these two places? Could I do little mini readings for them? And the answer comes back, yes, and here's their birth data. So I draw up charts for them, and I do 15-minute little mini readings for them. So here we are, we're in HarperCollins, which is a big blooming publishing house in London. Pretty scary. And the head of nonfiction meets Jonathan, big wet kiss on the cheek, that's the English way. And then Steve is there as well, and he gets a big wet kiss. And then she grabs me, and I get a big wet kiss because she's heard the little mini reading and she's on. So we go upstairs, and there's 5 people around the table. Jonathan's a little kind of like this, it's like, what am I doing here representing this woo-woo book? And Steve is there and saying, hey, you guys, you've got to publish this book. And the head of publishing says, don't listen to a word he says. He'll sell you anything. But everybody else at the table is leaning in.
Mm-hmm.
How does this guy know this stuff about us? How does he know to tell us in these 15-minute mini readings what our lives are all about?
Mm-hmm.
And literally, that's it. We walk out of there, we got a book deal, and I've got 6 months to send a text in. So I go back to California and, do my best writing up the text. Print a whole set, pack it up beautifully, send it off to London with a chip that's also got the text in an electronic form. This was 2008, I think, 2009. And nothing happens. I don't hear anything. Months go by. And then the word filters through. We got to chapter 5 and we couldn't understand it anymore. It's like, oh, So, in those days, I'm very good at speaking, not so good at writing. I've had to learn how to write a little bit since then. Never paid much attention in school. But anyway, so then Steve jumps on board and says, I'll help you do this. I'll help you ghost it. And of course, the book comes out magic. We're sending this text backwards and forwards to London. They've got an editor there who's saying this doesn't quite add up. Let's rearrange it a little bit. And the book to this day is magical. It's a beautiful book. I pick up any page in that book and I say, wow, this is miraculous stuff. It's beautiful. It's a really good description for anybody to be able to understand human design.
Mm-hmm.
And sure enough, that book's now in 15 languages all over the world. Bestseller in China, bestseller in Russia, bestseller in Germany.
Wow.
So yeah, it's somehow we hit the right note with it. And then of course, IHDS comes out with their version, which is like I don't know. It's a textbook. But there it is.
Super interesting. I haven't read your book. It's the one that's got the gold or yellow around the edges, right?
Yeah. I think I got a copy here somewhere.
So interesting. When I got introduced to human design,
this is the latest German version. Beautiful. They've just a new publisher's taken it up. Everything's in color. Incredible.
Yeah, but you know what, dude? That was the book that was used in a weekend where I was kind of introduced to human design and plant medicine and everything, one weekend.
Yeah.
And they asked a couple of questions and they had me, or at least it took a while. But what's so interesting is I never bought the book because I'd seen someone say, oh, this is the book to get, ignore all the rest. And my open head at the time was just like, oh, okay. And then but I remember that was the book that they had. So I'm going to have to actually grab it. That's fascinating. Well, I have so many questions, so many places we can go with this, but
yeah, go on. I've been talking too much. Go for it.
No. I loved every minute of it. So I've been keeping notes. The first one was just straight up when they took that measurement and measured your shadow, what was your posture at the time? Is it possible it was the wrong measurement? So that was the first question. You said you were tired.
When you follow the stream from standing in a parking lot with a funny stick on your foot and having your astrology and your numerology done, and you follow the stream to a page in a book, and it's like ding, 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 ding. What do you do with it?
Yeah.
The guy knew what he was about. He knew what he was doing. It was the right page.
Yeah. No, it's fascinating. And then you lived in Maui. I'm noticing a Hawaii connection with a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of folks that seem to spend time in Hawaii, particularly Maui. There seems to be little hotbeds of where people end up, like Santa Fe and I'm missing it right now.
Well, there are places in Australia and the places in Japan, and yes, when the ranch ended, living with Osho was always an amazing thing. He had 3 major communes or communities, one in India and then one in Oregon. Wild country is an outsider's view of what happened in Oregon, not the insider's view at all. Anyway, I could recognize bits of it. Mm-hmm. Kind of funny in retrospect. And then back in Pune again, he had his third community, and then he passed away. He left the body in 1990. January the 19th of 1990. I left the next day with my girlfriend. We took off to Japan to go and teach English. And we needed another environment that was sane. We hadn't reason to stay in India anymore. India is an extraordinary place. It's just, you'll notice this perhaps, in America and Canada and the West, everyone's in their head. Occasionally you meet somebody in their heart, but everyone's in their head. The whole thing's worked out through how you think. You go to India, it's the heart.
Mm-hmm.
Ancient connection into the heart. So it's very different. Japan has an extraordinary culture. Ancient culture. Large part of it borrowed from the Chinese, but, which is an even more ancient culture. I mean, what an incredible country or culture exists in China. I go to there to teach quite often. Blown away every time. Unbelievable depth of life and understanding and wisdom and culture and stuff. Incredible.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little messed up these days, but the essence is there.
Mm-hmm.
But I went to Japan. We went to Japan and taught English for a year. And then I got this call to go to Brazil to help this old friend of mine do a whole garden set up for a hotel and stuff. They were building a new hotel, and the thing fell through. But in Brazil, we traveled north up into the high plains, the high Chapadas. Beautiful countryside there. And a lot of ranching and stuff. A lot of kind of destructive agriculture. But we came across this pocket of land in a gully, in a ravine, where a river came out of a park where nobody could be messing with the land. The river came out pure and dropped into this canyon. And in this canyon, there was a complete microclimate, a jungle. And it was all these ancient hardwood trees and all these different life forms there, snakes and insects and cougars and people living there. It was an incredible thing. And we actually purchased this whole canyon. It was about 4 or 5 square miles of land in this canyon that was pristine. And in the end, it passed over to be a government park. It was protected. But we lived there for quite a while, doing whatever we could to kind of enhance the property. I mean, property is the wrong word for it, or to be in tune with the nature there. It was an incredible experience. And then that came to an end. And, my funds, whatever I'd earned in Japan, ran out. So it was time to beat a retreat. Went back to England, stayed with my mum there for a while. And then it was time to go. It was winter time in England. You live in Canada. The winter's not great as fun when it's cold and wet and freezing. Mm-hmm. So we took off and we ended up in Maui and found that a lot of our friends, both from the Oregon Ranch and from Pune, had moved there after Osho passed away. Mm-hmm. And I could say quite clearly I had about 300 friends there. It was an amazing community, and we'd meet and we'd meditate and we'd eat together and dance on the beach together. And it was a beautiful community. And it was during that time that, human design came into my world. And I was traveling twice a year to go to the classes that Ra brought with him. Magical place, Maui. I mean, talk about the healing that took place for me. I always said, I never really worked too well in the world. I always kind of was on the outside of things, doing freelance jobs and stuff. Yacht delivery, diving on pipelines in the North Sea, driving these trips through Asia and Africa and stuff. Always a little bit on the edge, And in Maui, obviously the consequence comes, what are you going to do to make a living here? And so I thought, well, the obvious thing is, I'm going to do my readings for people. So I started off half a day a week in a bookshop reading people's hands. And people would tell me they would actually arrange their vacation time so they could come and have a reading with me. And that was it. It was like I had the knack and it was evident it was working. And I used to do events, people would come for their big company parties at the hotels and they'd need some entertainment. So they'd haul a few of us in to go and do readings and whatever. And that kind of supplemented my income a little bit. But I'd go to the classes in Taos, and come back full of the latest, greatest human design thing. And I'd say, anyone want a reading? And everyone would go, no, we don't, thank you very much. We're fine. You know? And so there were a lot of times when I thought, wow, I'm really not going to make it. It's not going to happen. But then, you know, one thing leads to another, and the book came out. This is after moving to California with Carola. The book came out, and all of a sudden, we didn't just have a little practice of reading for people. We had a global audience. Like, the book caught on like wildfire around the world. Of course, HarperCollins were making all the returns on it. They'd given me a very nice advance to start with.
Right.
But, you know, there was very little income coming from the book, except people wanted to be in touch with us and find out, what is this thing you've got here?
Mm-hmm.
And so as much as we could, we'd read for people all over the place, and then do classes for people. And I started training people from 1997 onwards. And we do trainings these days still. I mean, I'm 72 years old now. I'm kind of, I wouldn't say I'm looking for the exit. I'm looking for simpler ways of using my energy, because reading for people, you know, it's a transmission. It's not just, hey, I'm going to tell you a bunch of stuff here. It's like, it's a transmission. People have massive wake-ups from the readings I give. And, you know, massive life changes.
Mm-hmm.
So the classes, I try and get people to do classes, you know, find out about the system. We train practitioners. We don't train analysts. I always objected to that word analyst, you know, and Ra kept saying, you know, you're not equipped to do anything unless you're an analyst.
Yeah.
And, you know, it was part of my objection to his Rei Vi Ching as well. This language is demeaning. We don't need to be demeaned. We don't need to be told that we're screwed up and messed up and stuff. We've already had that up to here. You know, just go into any church and you'll get echoes of it. And to me, there was always this danger that whatever Ra did would turn into a religion.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the IHDS, the Jovian. And for years, I was blacklisted. And I put up a website, and all of a sudden there were lawyers' letters and stuff, you know, you're not allowed to do this. And I heard all these people we trained and encouraged in human design, they were being shut down. There was going to be legal consequences if you maintain a human design presence. And I knew this was all bullshit. And we actually conferred with copyright lawyers. You know, there's such a system cannot be copyrighted. But the final crunch came when the Italians, through a great friend of mine, decided they were going to publish the human design book in Italian. And sure enough, you know, IHDS or somebody or other had sold this couple the exclusive rights to human design in Italy, you know. So the publishers put out, hey, we're publishing this book on human design. All of a sudden there's a court case. And these people, obviously with a lot of money, come in and, you know, they're just going to go to court and somehow eradicate the possibility of an Italian version of a human design book. So the thing goes to trial, and the publishers have this lawyer, and he's doing a pro bono for them. And the judge has all these 9 different points about why Chetan and human design do not make it in Italian. You know, and the book certainly doesn't make it. And the judge goes through each one of these points, one by one, and decimates them. And literally comes down to, it doesn't matter where you look, there is no case here.
Mm-hmm.
And he gives the publishers an award, costs and penalty against the people bringing the case. And so for once and for all, it was proven 100% there is no copyright on human design.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, hallelujah moment in time. It's like, yeah, finally, it's clear to everybody. And still, the people, the representatives will insist, oh, you know, we're the ones, we've got the holy word here. We're the only ones that are allowed to play with human design. And I've met so many people with so many brilliant ideas about human design. I know there's a lot of cuckoos as well, people that have no idea what human design is whatsoever. They want to turn it into sidereal astrology. They want to do this, that, and the other with it. It's quite clear, you know, Ra, we asked Ra about this, and he said, no, it's Western astrology. That's it. That's what I was told. That's what the voice said. That's the deal. It's not this sidereal stuff. But, and that's just one thing. People want to do all kinds of different things with it. And in those early years, when my friend Zeno in New Mexico was trying to qualify people to do human design readings, she would send me cassette tapes of people's readings, to get licensed or to get approved as a reader of human design. They've done a practice reading. And she'd send me these little cassettes, and I'd listen to these cassettes. It's like, what's this person talking about? Nothing to do with human design at all. It's like they've gone completely off the rails into something else. And a lot of people have done that. Even to this day, I sense that some of the stuff Ra put forward is nonsense.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's what to do. He was, as I said, he was always broke. He was always trying to, somehow or other provide for his family, his growing family. Never very comfortable with the idea that he was a guru. In fact, he hated the idea of being a guru. And just wanted to be, live a simple life, provide and have fun with it and have the right people around him. And every now and again, he lucked out. He got one or two right people around him. But in the meantime, he fell out with a lot of people. A lot of people went off on tangents. Richard Rudd, who's done the Gene Keys, he and I met in 1997 on Maui. He was living on Maui, and I gave him his first human design reading. It was so much fun meeting him and his wife. Lange Desieux was her name. She was Vietnamese, didn't know her time of birth, but she was a pure channel, mystical channel. Beautiful, brilliant. But so much fun meeting Richard. We became firm friends ever since. We kept running into each other at various Ra classes after that. And every time I go to England, we sit and have a tea together and talk about whatever. He's done some beautiful work with the Gene Keys.
Yeah.
Again, it's not what can I say? It's not a cure for life, Gene Keys. It's just some beautiful signposts. Same as human design, some beautiful signposts. But ultimately, it all comes down to frequency. It all comes down to what is your natural frequency? Can you live it? Can you be in it? Whatever life wants to present or apparently happens around you, can you be true to yourself? And that's what human design does. I have a wonderful friend here in California. He's a reflector. And I've known him probably now 12 years or so through somebody I did a reading for ages ago. And he was there helping put together some script for a movie. And he and we just hit it off right away. I mean, I love reflectors anyhow, if they'll put up with me. There's something so precious about their level of trust in life. And so I'd ride over there on my motorbike and we'd go off for lunch or somewhere together and, talk about what's the state of the universe and stuff. And I think it was 2018 or something, he became fully enlightened. He got it. He got the drift. And I had watched him going into that process, the dark night of the soul, where everything starts falling to pieces and he can't see any continuity or any connection anymore. And because I'd lived with Osho and I'd heard Osho talk so much about the state of what it's like when you go into the dark night of the soul and just nothing makes sense anymore, I was able to kind of help my friend a little bit and just say, you're on track. Don't worry. It'll all turn out fine. Don't give up. And sure enough, there he was. He popped. And then, he came to stay last year. And I've been in touch with him. We talk all the time, but he came to stay here. And I talked to him a little bit about human design. He said, what do you make about human design? And he says, well, basically, when you get your chart, it's your karma chart. Everything's on it. All you got to do is not only recognize it, but embrace it and live it. And that's it. All the time you live true to your chart, you are burning off anything that might be seen as karma, or things that are complications, or things that are holding you back. This was such a profound statement for me. And then I said, well, all right, what's the difference between before you were enlightened and now that you are enlightened? And he just says, well, nothing bothers me anymore.
Yeah.
I thought, the thing of all the catastrophes that we have in our life, this isn't working and that's not right and so is being a pain in the ass. He says, nothing bothers me anymore. And that's it. That's the clear recognition that you are in your movie. You are the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever happens. Anyway, he's teaching all over the world now, and just an amazing presence. If you ever come across him, his name's Delson, Delson, Delson Armstrong.
No,
And, yeah.
I'll have to check them out.
Born in India in a Christian family, and now teaches from Buddhist texts. Genius.
Okay.
Very, very sweet man. So, yeah, human design. What's human design all about? Where's it going to go? Our website, Evolutionary Human Design. The way it's put out is, no, this is the deal. This is it. It's fixed. Just no choice. You're stuck. God knows what's going to happen to you. And it's like, really?
Yeah.
I preferred how Osho would describe it as choiceless awareness. Choiceless awareness. Be aware, and then the choices will just come naturally.
Mm-hmm.
The decisions will just drop in because you're in a state of awareness while that decision is happening. And so, we fabricated, we got emotional authority and a sacral authority. It's just frequency.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a frequency match? That's all. And we got projectors and we got generators. It's a frequency match.
Mm-hmm.
There's only one thing going on here. I know it's a duality, but there's only a universe. There's only one thing happening. As much as a projector might be waiting for an invitation, so it is the projector is putting out, hey, I'm available. And this is my deal. So, the type and authority is a very clever thing.
Mm-hmm.
I hate that word strategy.
Mm-hmm.
He started using the word strategy when he'd messed up with manifesting generators. Manifesting generators are a fifth type. They are not generators. And they're not manifestors either. But anyway. So,
sorry, I heard someone say recently, and I don't know why I assumed the otherwise, but that manifesting generator is actually an older type. In my head, I think hybrid and assume that it's some sort of, manifestors and generators had a baby and it was a man, right? That was my brain used to go there, right? And then I heard, oh no, it's an older type. And but like my brain can go in a lot of different places, but I locked in on that for a while, right? So
I honestly don't know what to tell you. Yeah, it's all good.
Mm-hmm.
Here's my issue with human design and my whole issue with the variables and stuff like that. The more labels you put on something, you're only allowed to eat on a mountaintop in a damp kitchen in the dark. It's like the more labels you put on stuff, the more screwed up you get.
Yeah.
And you start adopting a negative label, like terminal disease or one night stand or whatever like that. It's like, what are you supposed to do with that stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And wherever I go, people ask me, we learn this with one night stand, this doesn't fit in our culture. It's like, of course it doesn't fit in your culture. Anyway, so any kind of demeaning label or any label at all that we put on ourselves is limiting.
Mm-hmm.
The moment we start recognizing our frequency, whether we have to go through recognizing our authority, how do I feel about all of this? It's about, you can have instantaneous emotional clarity, but you've just got to be really present and you've got to be watching your emotions. You've got to be feeling as the waves come through.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got to be recognizing, there's a top end, there's a bottom end. Where am I? Can I find that golden thread in the middle of it all?
Mm-hmm.
For emotional people, the most, dramatic drama queens on the planet. We are. Any of us that have a defined emotion, we're all drama queens. But you've got to remember, every single wave, from the very beginning of your life to the very end of your life, every single wave is connected.
Mm-hmm.
And there are times in the wave where there's a trauma, and every time the record gets to that same part of the music, boom, you get stuck and it jumps, What do we do about that? We raise our awareness about it. So instead of reacting, we play it.
Mm-hmm.
That's what it's all about. It's finding the frequency. It's recognizing things. It's being aware.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I want to talk about frequency and vibration. And
Yes.
I remember so when we spoke 6 or 8 weeks ago, and you reminded me that I was highly acoustic, and that sat with
Yes,
me quite a bit.
yes,
It's that 57 uh, gate. I just recognize it, right?
yes,
And
yes,
someone suggested, because I have taste cognition, and to me, what was suggested to me and ended up working really well for me is they suggested like taste how people's words sound, and I realized
yes,
that I'm hearing the flavor, so it's even acoustic that way, right? Like, oh, that's what they're saying sounds bitter. That's sweet. This is sour. Um, I don't even know where I'm going with that, other than you also sent me on the path of looking up Wilhelm Reich, and I kind of had found him or his work previously. I have an orgone pyramid. I had these things, but didn't know
yeah,
why I had them. Like I just kind of you know acquired them in some late night thing that caught my interest, and then I started looking into his work, and I think you mentioned it because I told you I've got an interest in tuning forks and chromatic
yeah,
glasses, and like I've just got this little lab that I don't actually spend a lot of time in. I just have them and exploring them. But I started looking into his work and what he was doing with his orgone box, which is
yes,
like organic and inorganic materials, and I've seen people conduct experiments and watching people's behavior inside this box where they get relaxed, and they this one guy did one that was really interesting, but he had one that was the orgone box, one that wasn't, and didn't tell them what they were supposed to experience. But then watching them and watching them totally relax in that orgone box, they literally had no outside interference. They just sat with themselves, and it was kind of
yeah,
like what I imagine, as I've heard, sort of someone has suggested like a reflector would do really well to just go lock yourself in an old schoolhouse for 28 days and just be
yeah,
you for 28 days,
yeah,
right? Just experience you and the moon and all that stuff. I imagine that's kind of what the orgone box would be, but like in a smaller window. You could go do that for 20 minutes, get really relaxed. And of course, in my head, I'm like, between I've got tuning forks for astrology, I've got tuning forks for human biology. Like I want to play someone's song. I want to basically go bing, 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 put them inside this box, just have them like experience something so profound that they're just like, okay, I'm going to pay attention going forward. It's going to turn on your intuition, which is kind of what we need going into a world of AI. Like there's really nothing left except your wits, right? So how do you
yeah,
get in touch with your
really,
wits? And to me, there's something there. I haven't really taken it since, but that's a whole long build up to what do you know about Wilhelm Reich? You talk about frequency and vibration. You have an interest there. Like, you want to nerd out there for a minute?
well, this is a man that was tortured for being
Mm-hmm.
ahead of his time. A little bit like Nikola Tesla, way too intelligent. And, the vested interest just did not like anything he was doing. But he did, amongst other things, produce this orgone box, which is a neutral space.
Mm-hmm.
Why it really fascinated me, because, the moment we come out into this world, we're harassed from all sides. We're conditioned right from the moment we pop out here. We're given all kinds of dictates and behavior patterns and bad energies and good energies and all kinds of stuff. It's a miracle that we actually survive that whole thing. But it's quite evident we're all thoroughly conditioned, whether we like it or not. And the whole thing with human design is recognizing what it is that works for us. What are your designers all about? How it works? What is the uniqueness of your makeup and your nature? And if we can find our way back to it, then we've done an amazing work. And the human design is quite extraordinary in that regard. I watch people all the time getting closer and closer and closer to who they really are and enjoying that space. What occurred to me, and I think we talked about this with the orgone box, is the orgone box produces a neutral environment. Totally neutral. There's no impingement of energy from the outside whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
So what occurred to me was, we have everyone's designs. We've got 13 numbers on the right, 13 on the left. We can put in Chiron as well if we want, because that's where the body and soul gets to join each other. So we've got star field frequency. We got hexagram and line number from relating to that star field frequency. We can boil it down into a genetic code or whatever, but it's got a frequency, right? A vibration. Then those neutrinos pass through something in our solar system, exchange of energy, addition of frequency. Then it comes and locks into our genes. So whether we like it or not, there's a, every one of these numbers has got a frequency locked in somewhere in our being.
Mm-hmm.
And there it makes up our unique frequency. So my idea was, go sit in an orgone box and have a sound system set up in there, or a frequency vibrational system in there that plays your music.
Mm-hmm.
Plays your exact frequency from the moment you were born. And then if you like, march it out a little bit. Take it out very slowly the first few hours, and then very slowly the first few days, and then the first weeks, and bring you out into the present tense.
Mm-hmm.
And see, or if you like, go back, go back, look at another lifetime or another solar system somewhere or other, where something else was going on. I mean, it was just a play. But I thought, the idea of being able to provide a neutral space, anything could happen from that. And as you remark, people go into that thing and they just relax. It's obvious I'm not being bombarded by whatever the insanity is, or latest insanity on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, I mean, a beautiful, beautiful man with these extraordinary ideas. And yes, you're very much tuned in. Now, it's not something I'm going to build, but, who knows? Somebody may pick up on the idea and see, I can go one better than this. I can take it even further than this.
Yeah, no, I'm making some friends that have some interesting ideas in that space. A fellow that I've connected with, he's a beautiful singer. He's an artist, but he's already said, I'm kind of done with music right now. He just wants to explore sacral sounds. And he had actually created a bunch of, he was experimenting with, where the sacral is and what that vibration was. And I just find it fascinating. So, so an orgone box, getting my wife on board with that, and where to put such a thing. So in my head, I'm like, this little room here, do I need to build the box, or do I pad the walls with wool and steel wool? Can things seep out and in? Part of me is I've got a budget, I've got a spouse that's not going to be impressed by my project in a space that's being used for other things. So I'm trying to be practical, right? So, but was an orgone blanket? Because I got to do this. I do have a tiny little, and it's super interesting. The people I'm meeting and my fractal, I went looking for an orgone blanket, and I went on Etsy, and they're not cheap because people are it's fine work and stitching and they're all talking about the precise calculations too, right? It's precisely this many inches and fascinating. So I go to buy this blanket, and it's $80. And in my head, I thought I read it as 4 feet, or no, what was it? Well, basically it's 2 feet by 2 feet, but in my head, it was gonna be a much bigger blanket. So in the end, it's like a blanket for a puppy. But I go to buy it, and then the woman writes back and says, "Oh, you're in Canada. Don't worry, it's different shipping. Oh, you're in BC. Oh, you're 20 minutes from my house." And so between the time I had ordered this thing and I had randomly just decided I was going to buy this blanket, I'm driving to her house in Souk, and then she gives it to me because it's my birthday. And so it was just this weird thing, right? So I have this small blanket, but I either need to pad the room. I don't know. There's something absolutely fascinating about it for sure. And yeah, his work, he was made out to be a pervert and all these things, right? They really,
yes.
Yeah. And so they
people are terrified of sex to this day, and anyone that kind of pushes that envelope a little bit. I lived for 11 years with the sex guru.
Osho,
that was Osho, yeah. It's really? And you look at his design, he's got an open sacral center. Like Brad Pitt, sexiest man alive, open sacral center.
That's interesting. So why does that make someone with an open sacral sexy?
It's projection. It's projection. It's reflection. You can have every nasty thought you ever kind of dreamed up about sex reflected back to you. There's my thing, the open centers, pure mirrors, and I say this to people with an open diamond center in the middle, what I call the self center. Nobody ever knew why it was called the G center until they realized it's the Fibonacci sequence. Perfect geometry connects us into the most distant star. We're totally connected here through that G Fibonacci sequence.
Right.
And I tell people with an open self center, nobody knows who the hell you are. Nobody. You're completely free. You can play out any role you like in life. Wherever you go, that's who you are. Whoever you hang out with, that's who you are. And so you come across people that like you. What is happening in that interaction is they are liking an aspect of themselves that is being reflected back to them. It has nothing to do with you, never has done, never will do. Same thing, you meet somebody that doesn't like you. Same thing, they're seeing a reflection of themselves they don't like about themselves. And it's the same with all these centers, the totally open white centers. And it's just, there's such a freedom. Even in an undefined center, even if it's got gates in there, there's such a freedom in recognizing, this is where I get to play. I can get conditioned if I allow it to be. I can take on everybody else's ways of doing stuff as that was important to me. But really, this is where I get to play. This is where I get to share my wisdom. I see undefined centers as a room. Wherever you've got a gate, there's a light bulb in that corner of the room. But basically, the light bulbs are off. So somebody with a defined center walks into that room and all the light bulbs in the various corners turn on according to where that wisdom is stored. And the person that's coming in can get a reflection or get the wisdom from that corner of the room. They go out, the lights go off again. There's such a freedom in white centers when they're seen rightly. And there's when there's such a mess in them, when we just take them for granted, I must be able to use this. And the classic one is the throat center with the undefined throat center. Just casting out all kinds of wisdom, regardless of anyone being able to get it. And then over talking and then straining the throat. And then nobody wants to hear it anymore. So human design can teach us a lot, but it is choiceless awareness. Choiceless awareness. Choiceless, be in your frequency and be aware. Be watchful, be alert, be present.
Yeah. No, I like that. Choiceless awareness. And we have a choice in how we show up, and how we show up is awareness with where the design is, right? Yeah.
Attitude.
And then you vibe your outer
it's
authority.
It's a game changer. Attitude.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, jump in again. Are you doing okay for time? We've been about an hour and 10 here.
I'm good. I can probably do another 10 minutes or so, but let's see how we get on.
Sure. I've never heard the term leptons before, but you were talking about quarks and leptons. What's interesting is there's... Oh, go ahead. Yeah. What is a lepton?
Well, no, I mean, what is a lepton? It's one of these microparticles. And I honestly, it was a long time ago, but I needed to know this stuff from my teacher training with Ra in 1997. He insisted I knew the physics to be able to explain the physics of how the energy of the universe was going to provide somebody with a chart. That was his process at that time, because we didn't know. We couldn't prove neutrinos. He'd been told about it in 1987, but it was non-proven. It was a theory. The theory came down to physicists trying to measure the mass of the universe, going back to a thing called the Big Bang. So they went back, they compiled everything, did all their mathematical calculations, and recognized about 80% of the mass was missing. They couldn't account for it. So they put forward this theory there may be these things called neutrinos. And then, as I say, it was proven in 1997 that they actually had mass and they did exist. What is it, 3 trillion per second in every direction per square inch? Yeah.
Something like that, like And how can it not have an influence? So, right? Yeah. Fascinating.
So leptons, yeah, they were part of the atomic theory at that time. I think they've probably gone a little bit down the scale of importance lately, but who knows? You know, they're messing around in Switzerland still trying to divide particles into all this, that, and the other, trying to find the meaning of life in a big circle or loop. It's amazing.
Well, and I mean, I think that's what makes this time so exciting. Like the amount of information we're being exposed to, the amount of things that we're seeing that was magic before, and once you see it, it's like, oh, that's a thing, that's a possibility now. Add it to a list of possibilities. It's increasing rapidly.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, because you said something that stuck with me, and I've repeated many times since. You said 4323. That channel is knowing without knowledge,
Yeah.
and ever since you've said it, I was like, oh, for me, that's what ChatGPT is. I have all this knowledge. I don't know. I ask it questions. It gives me what I'm looking for, right? So, like, to me, we all actually now have an analog of the 4323, whether we have it by design, in transit, in awareness of someone else in our orbit or aura, or like, hey, no, you just log into your account and have a conversation with yourself, and it's fascinating the things that it comes up with, or that I come up with, right, by
Yeah.
asking, just constantly being curious. And I think if more people did that, we'd be solving all kinds of problems, because if everyone got curious instead of complacent, um, things would be rocking, right? Maybe.
Well, I know for a fact that all the pharmaceutical industries are going nuts with AI. And the way I look at it, Sean, is there are a lot of people that are going to be questioning their pension plan. Because when AI gets into healthcare, you know, real healthcare, not just this system that's put about, you know, because of the vested interests, so you've got to support these drug companies and stuff. But when it gets into real healthcare, a lot of doctors are going to be shown the door. We don't need you anymore.
Mhm.
You know, we've got a machine to look after this person, and you know, it's going to do a much better job than you is. And we're not worried about the insurance because it always does it right.
Mm-hmm.
Lawyers, we don't need you anymore. Everything's already been decided, you know, plus and minus, whatever, you're done for.
Yep.
Taxi drivers, yeah, forget it. You know, the car can do itself. And anyhow, we're going to have flying cars anyhow, so it's no longer an issue.
Yep.
Mechanics, you know, no, the car, we've got it self-programmed, it'll fix itself. I mean, you think about any job that anyone is doing at the moment, and they're going to be looking for something else. The job's gone. Waitresses, waiters, cooks, whatever, gone, finished.
Mm-hmm.
So then what happens? You know, then people start having demonstrations. Give me my job back. You know, I go home, I'm bored to death. The wife doesn't want to see me anymore. All I do is sit in my little hole and drink myself to death.
Mm-hmm.
What are we going to do? And, you know, this is part of this whole shift at the moment, out of the Piscean age into the Aquarian age. The Piscean age is based on religion and politics. Right? The politics is there's always going to be a pecking order, and somebody is going to tell you what to do with yourself. They're going to prescribe the rule system for you. The religion, well, you know, we got this God thing going on, person, Holy Ghost, whatever, you know, or some derivative of this. We got this one book that you're allowed to read.
Yep.
Forget about anything else. You know, we got all these strictures. You're not allowed to think for yourself. You've got to believe in this thing. You've got to believe in the crucifixion. Anybody that's ever done any kind of history exploration will know that you cannot die in a 5-hour crucifixion. It takes at least a day and a half, and you have to have your legs broken, and somebody has to jab your lungs. Then you die after a day and a half. So the whole foundation of this thing of the cross and the crucifixion and all this, it's horseshit, just to put in simple terms. And yet, you know, you got people sitting in Texas waiting for Jesus to walk out of the clouds and come and rescue them.
Mm-hmm.
After what happened to him last time? I don't think so. And, you know, like the world has been based on these two things, the collective, the belief systems, the abstract, and the logic, the judicial system or so-called political system. Because all the people in Congress, anyhow, they're ex-lawyers. That's how they think. We're moving out of this age. We're moving into the Aquarian age, which is the age of the two waves, as above, so below. We're moving into the age of the responsible individual.
Mm-hmm.
We're moving into an age of transformation. And transformation cannot happen by following the party line. The party line is finished, and all of us have got to recognize that. You cannot be leaning on somebody else's idea of what life is. You have to live true to yourself.
Yeah.
Which brings us to this whole point of what an incredible gift that somehow Ra was able to download and put out to the world for us. Thank you, Ra. Good job.
Yeah, and I think you were saying before, like there's various mutations that have occurred from like other people's works, and thank goodness for that too, right? Like
Indeed.
the Rave I Ching and Ra's, I think you described it like he was sitting cold around a fire and he was using charcoal, and like when I read it doesn't resonate for me. Like it's word salad for me, and so for example, it's amazing. Again, my orbit and world, but like my pickleball partner and massage therapist is also heavily involved in the neutrino design platform. And the I Ching that's in there is his, because from a licensing standpoint, you can't use the original one. So the default is his, and it's a nicer language. But now I can switch between the two, and I read his, right? Or like yours, or like anyone's that adds a different perspective.
This one was written over. This one took me 17 years to write. The Book of Lines, and I'm proud of it to this day.
Can I get that on Amazon still?
I believe it's out of print at the moment. They've asked me to put in a new version. It was printing beautifully for 10 years, and then they said they couldn't print it anymore. Their machinery screwed up or something happened. So I'm doing a new version of it, a second edition. But yeah, it's written, as I say, in fifth dimensional language. It's here to take you into a meditative space. That's what it's designed to do. So,
well, that's beautiful. It's like the meditated. So back to the orgone box and frequency and meditation and affirmations, right? Like if you were to sit in a space and have the correct language spoken to you while you're meditating and flowing in that vibing state, and the solar, if you're in the solar plexus and you've got that sound bowl, or you've got like, it's just fascinating to me where you literally, the person would just be played, and respond. So
that's why music is so magical. You see why the collective process is not going to work anymore, because it's visual. Logic side is the right eye, abstract side is the left eye, the absorptive eye, the giving out eye. And it's, that's the whole abstract and logic circuitry, the collective. Seeing is believing, or seeing, we're agreeing on a point of view, or we're saying that we're in the same thing, having the same belief. It's what Osho used to call the bullet cart approach. Go as slowly as you like. There's very little transformation is possible, but you're going really creeping along. Becoming true to yourself, which is basically the individual circuitry. It's individual, it's acoustic, it's vibrational. And so the transformation that's coming about, moving out of the collective, moving out of the landlord or the boss or the politician, all these are going to go back into being a regular situation where humanity, hopefully, survives this shift into AI, because AI does not have consciousness. AI is just a bunch of everybody else's input. It's fascinating, the process. But it's still, it's plagiarism on a maximum scale.
Yeah.
So the human consciousness is still capable of extraordinary things. I mean, for example, I remember sitting with Osho, and he's discoursing every day, a couple of hours a day, and we're all sitting there. And he'd say, what I'm telling you is all fine, but it's the gaps between the words. It's the pause between the notes is when you can drop into the knowing. It's all about the sound. It's all about that sound and silence. The sound can lead you to silence. So in the organ box, there's this whole thing. The sound can take you to that realization where you just drop into yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what it's all about. So the collective in these years coming, I mean, this new theme that we're moving into, the sleeping phoenix, 3 individual gates, one kind of tribal-ish gate, the 59. The 59, the 55, the sacral to the sacred. Heaven on earth, that's where we're going, kids.
Mm-hmm.
That's what's going to happen. But in the meantime, with all these people that are out of a job, what are they going to do? They're going to drink themselves to death, or they're going to smoke themselves to death, or they're going to start fighting with each other or shooting each other or whatever people do when they're bored and fed up. We've already seen the whole of Nextwick's, whole library. We're done. We're fed up. What are we going to do? Go and dig a hole in the garden or something? So, yeah, what's got to happen now in these next years is creativity.
Yeah.
That's what's going to happen. Everybody's got to find their creative access to life.
Yeah.
The cities are going to devolve. The cities, America's 80% of the population is living on the east side of the country, because it's desert and the rest. Well, let's undesify it, and get people to move here and set up communities and stuff. Sure, it's all going to happen. That's the Aquarian thing, is making beautiful communities. And
so,
yeah.
Because it's so funny, but I remember reading or seeing that Osho said he was 50 or 100 years ahead of his time. And then when I think of Oregon, and it was basically desert in the mountains, created this sort of like place where they just built their own community. And then, of course,
we did build our own community. Yes,
yeah.
We did.
No, it's amazing. So it was like a prototype. I don't even know. I wonder what it's even like there now. Like, is there even remnants of it? It
got bought by some Christian organization. They have a camp there for troubled kids. And apparently it's wonderful what they do there. The kids just go there for these poor communities, distressed communities, and they just go there and have the time of their lives.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Yeah, that's heartening too, because you obviously built buildings and all sorts of stuff there. Burn it down, send a message.
I tell you, from the inside out, here was a bunch of people that didn't know one end of a hammer from another. We all had PhDs and stuff like that, and it's like, here we are in the middle of nowhere, we're building a city. We worked so blooming hard. We'd work 16-hour days. We'd just bust ourselves, having so much fun, ridiculous amounts of fun, realizing we're clueless. We've got to learn how to do this stuff. And we built these extraordinary buildings, hotels, swimming pools, the whole business. It was we dammed up a lake. I mean, can you imagine driving, these massive earth movers, they're kind of 40 feet long, we had a bunch of these things, digging up the soil and dumping it and compacting it and building this huge dam. The things we did, we built a city for 5,000 people in the space of 4 years. And we have festivals for 20,000 people.
Mm-hmm.
The whole Portland airport would turn red. People coming, chartering flights from Europe, from Australia, from all over the place. And the whole airport, everyone was walking around wearing red clothes, having the time of their lives, coming for the festivals. So much celebration. But there it was. It was a pioneering thing. It was basically setting the tune for what is possible when people engage together from their hearts.
Yeah.
That was the whole thing, right? From the heart, then anything is possible. And then the celebration. Yeah.
Well, sorry, it's just very beautiful. And it's, you're talking earlier about like the state of where things go. It's people get their self-esteem from their jobs as well right now. And if your job is eliminated by AI, then you need to put your hand up and go, what job can I do today? And then imagine that's what you were doing in that community. Was you weren't the painter or the plumber. Like you said, you're like, I got to learn how to drive a tractor. Like you just did what it took.
How about a D8? That was the funniest things. In the end, the big bulldozers were driven by the girls. They were much more careful drivers, as it turned out. It's funny.
Yeah.
So yeah, we learned how to do stuff, and it was an extraordinary experiment. I don't think Osho liked the place from the moment he arrived there. It wasn't him who organized it; somebody else organized it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think his first statement when he arrived there is, "Where are the trees?"
Mm-hmm.
You know, he wanted to come to a place where there was forests and stuff, and all the way were kind of scrubby juniper and sage.
So,
So yeah, it was a great experiment.
mm-hmm.
I was a very early arriver there, and I kind of figured, it's going to take a lot. I'd grown up on a farm, so I knew quite a bit about what was involved in living in the country and looking after the countryside. But it never occurred to me that this was a lifelong thing. To me, it was like it was a mystical exercise in a way, and we
Mm-hmm.
all stretched ourselves. And I don't know if you've ever come across George Gurdjieff, but George Gurdjieff was a mystic that came out of the Caucasus somewhere, and he set up this school in Paris. And he'd have these people drawn to him. He was a fully enlightened being, extraordinary man. It was definitely worth looking up. You'd like him, like Wilhelm Reich, George Gurdjieff.
How do you
And
spell it?
Gurdjieff,
Okay.
George. Anyway, he would have this exercise for people. He'd have people come, and they were like us, intellectuals or whatever, and he'd have these exercises, physical exercise. And he'd say, go out and dig a trench. Go out and get a shovel. I want a trench from here to there. And then, people would be in the middle of this thing, pouring sweat, digging like crazy, because he wouldn't have slackers. He'd say, you're either going to do it or not. Go away if you're not going to do it. So they'd be full on into this, total energy into it. And then all of a sudden he'd yell out, stop. And it didn't matter what you were doing, milking the cows, digging the ground, mowing the lawn, whatever, you stopped dead in your tracks. And you held the energy. Wherever body posture you were in, leg in the air, whatever, you just stopped. And that was it. You stayed there and watched the energy in you. And then, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, he'd say, okay, start again. And so everyone would go back to it again, having had this very profound meditative experience. And then he'd come around, and where the people would say, hey, we've done the trench for you, he'd say, okay, now fill it up. It's basically the whole thing about life is the job is you get a nice job, it's a plus. You get a nice wife, it's a plus. You get nice kids, it's a plus. You get a good meal, it's a plus. But the point of it all is who the heck are you? What are you doing with yourself here? Mm-hmm. Are you playing somebody else's game? Are you just copying the guy next door? Or are you living true to yourself? That's the whole deal. And that was Osho's thing right from the get-go. You ever listen to any of his talks? This is the most genius talker of all times. He would never admit it. He was a professor of philosophy. 1 week he'd argue a whole point. Somebody would ask him a question and he'd go right into it. He'd go all the way around the universe a few times and nail that question and say, this is the only possible way you can look at this situation. And then a week later, he'd somehow or other come from completely the opposite direction and say, whatever you thought was going on last week, you must have been crazy if you thought that was the answer, because this is the answer. Mm-hmm. And he'd always say there's two sides to every coin. There's two sides to every argument or philosophy or theocracy or whatever you want. There's always two sides to it. What is your point? Mm-hmm. What resonates with you? Mm-hmm. Can you get away from these dogmas, these creeds, these set in place, cast in stone ideas that have been put about, these limiting belief systems? Can you get away from that and be true to you? And that was his whole work from beginning to end, talking about how the Aquarian age is going to be, what it's all about, what's needed to happen. And the mm-hmm. first thing is to get rid of politics. The second thing is get rid of religions, right? Because they all have these limiting situations. We have these people in Washington, in America, these politicians, they're all multimillionaires. How do they get that? Because they know the news before it happens. They mm-hmm. make the investments before, it's an inside club. And basically, they are when you go right down to it, they're civil servants. Mm-hmm. They belong on the back page of the newspaper, not on the front.
Yeah.
They're here to serve the people. And it's absolutely the very last thing they do. They're just part of the vested interests. Same thing with the priests. I mean, you look at the story of the Christianity, how priests were not allowed to marry around 10,000, what was it, like 1000 or something, 1000 AD.
Yeah.
They were able to marry up until that time, but then they were not allowed to marry anymore. Why? Because, the priest would make a little bit of cash and then he'd pass it on to his family, and then the church would lose the property, and right. So all of a sudden the church says, no, we want it. So stop marrying, And what about the fish on Fridays? Well, the fishermen are having a bit of a tough season, so everybody eat fish on Fridays. There's all this crap tied up in these things.
Mm-hmm.
And as I said, the crucifixion really is a fiction, same as the Immaculate Conception. Joseph was his dad. Come on, get real.
Mm-hmm.
Nice guy. And then the wife was probably 14 years old or something, but all good.
Okay, well,
It's a comedy. Anyway, human design, this is our key for these times. Coming back to the point, yes, Sean. Really, there is so much in this. You have so much to offer people with your design. And I'm looking at your design now. It's all acoustic. Yeah, you can get the rules, you can get the regulations. You're a great storyteller, right? You're somebody who can give very succinct directions to people. But I would say the bottom line of your design is having fun.
I'm trying.
Celebration.
Something you said earlier, and I've heard it 5 or 6 times, and it was correlated to my design. So I'll ask you, and it kind of ties into all this too. The Groucho Marx line, I would not belong to a club that would have me as a member. I've heard that correlated, and I can't remember if it's the 31-7 or the 8-1, but it was something to do with that, and it was like it's been echoed to me several times, and it feels right. No matter where I go, I somehow outstay my welcome, so I pretty much mic drop before they drop me. So so we're like, hey, it's been a great time, everybody. Good night, and I go before they're like, get the fuck out. So
it's almost like everybody could have that statement. When you're really being true to yourself, why would you join a club? I'm a projector, for example. Projectors are outsiders. We cannot afford to become insiders. That's for generators, manifesting generators, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But projectors were definitely outsiders, same with manifestors. We're not part of the club. So automatically, there's a dismissal. Sorry, chum, I'm not fan material. Maybe I like what you're doing, but I'm not going to give you my vote just because. And I'm certainly, with my 49, I'm certainly not going to join your revolution. I'm a rebel.
Mm-hmm.
It's a very important difference.
Mm-hmm.
The Gate 49, which apparently is coming into some question in these times coming, who knows?
Yeah, that's where the split might be.
This mutation, who knows? It's like nobody knows what's going to happen when this mutation happens. Nobody knows what these children are going to be capable of. And anyhow, it's probably going to take them 10 or 15 years or whatever to start having some effect. But anyway, the 49 is made a revolution. There are 3 levels to revolution. The one is outright rejection, the knee-jerk no, I don't like you or anything to do with you. No. Blanket no. No, no, no. Then there's the revolution, which is like the typical example of the American Congress. We've got our principles, you've got yours, and we're just going to fight. We're not going to do anything for anybody. We're just going to fight. Right? That's revolution. You look at Russia. I mean, what's happened? The whole apple cart turned upside down, and now we got Tsar Putin. Same thing. Same nonsensical thing. Revolution does not work. It's still the peasants are still the peasants.
Mm-hmm.
The top level, the highest level, and this is what Osho used to talk about all the time, was be the rebel.
Mm-hmm.
Be the rebel. Be true unto yourself. That's all the deal is here. Be true to yourself. End of story. Have a very rich, fulfilling, celebrated life. But trust in yourself. Nobody has ever told you to trust in yourself. Ever. I don't care who we're talking about, school teachers, priests, parents, anybody. Nobody has ever told you, trust in you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, finally, we have this human design system that says, this is your deal. This is how it works. Give it a go. Keep giving it a go. Stay true to yourself. That's the bottom line. Anyway, all good fun.
Yeah.
Dude, I got to take off.
That's a perfect time to wrap. Okay, I'm going to do my little thing where I don't like to edit, so I'm going to play a little video out here. I'm going to take you off screen, but stick around. I'd like to talk to you for a couple more minutes before you go.
All right. Great pleasure being here with you, Sean. Great
really
pleasure. And
enjoyed it.
people find us evolutionaryhumandesign.com.
Yeah, exactly. And I'll make sure it's in the description as well. So
We have a lot to offer, really. I've got a few more years of giving people transformational readings, and it will transform your life, I guarantee it. Anyway.
Awesome. Thank you. Oop.